1 Maccabees, chapter 11. Ptolemy invades Syria. And the king of Egypt gathered great forces, like the sand by the seashore, and many ships, and he tried to get possession of Alexander's kingdom by trickery and add it to his own kingdom. He set out for Syria with peaceable words, and the people of the cities opened the gates to him and went to meet him. For Alexander the king had commanded them to meet him, since he was Alexander's father-in-law. But when Ptolemy entered the cities, he stationed forces as a garrison in each city. When he approached Azotus, they showed him the temple of Dagon burned down, and Azotus and its suburbs destroyed, and their corpses lying about, and the charred bodies of those whom Jonathan had buried in war, for they had piled them in heaps along his route. They also told the king what Jonathan had done, to throw blame on him, but the king kept silent. Jonathan met the king of Joppa with pomp, and they greeted one another and spent the night there. And Jonathan went with the king as far as a river called Eleutherus. Then he returned to Jerusalem. So King Ptolemy gained control of the coastal cities as far as Seleucia by the sea, and he kept devising evil designs against Alexander. He sent envoys to Demetrius the king, saying, "Come, let us make a covenant with each other, and I will give you in marriage my daughter, who was Alexander's wife, and you shall reign over your father's kingdom. For I now regret that I gave him my daughter, for he has tried to kill me." He threw blame on Alexander because he coveted his kingdom. So he took his daughter away from him and gave her to Demetrius. He was strangled from Alexander, and their enmity became manifest. Then Ptolemy entered Antioch and put on the crown of Asia. Thus he put two crowns upon his head, the crown of Egypt and that of Asia. Now Alexander the king was in Cilicia at that time, because the people of that region were in revolt. And Alexander heard of it and came against him in battle. Ptolemy marched out and met him with a strong force and put him to flight. So Alexander fled into Arabia to find protection there, and King Ptolemy was exalted. And Zebedee the Arab cut off the head of Alexander and sent it to Ptolemy. But King Ptolemy died 3 days later, and his troops in the strongholds were killed by the inhabitants of the strongholds. So Demetrius became king in the 167th year. Jonathan's diplomacy. In those days, Jonathan assembled the men of Judah to attack the citadel in Jerusalem, and he built many engines of war to use it against it. But certain lawless men who hated the nation went to the king and reported to him that Jonathan was besieging the citadel. When he heard this, he was angry, and as soon as he heard it, he set out and came to Ptolemy, and he wrote Jonathan not to continue the siege, but to meet him for a conference at Ptolemy as quickly as possible. When Jonathan heard this, he gave orders to continue the siege, and he chose some of the elders of Israel and some of the priests and put himself in danger. For he went to the king at Ptolemy, taking silver and gold and clothing and numerous other gifts. And he won his favor. Although certain lawless men of his nation kept making complaints against him, the king treated him as his predecessors had treated him. He exalted him in the presence of all his friends. He confirmed him in the high priesthood and in as many other honors as he had formerly had, and made him to be regarded as one of his chief friends. Then Jonathan asked the king to free Judah and the 3 districts of Samaria from tribute, and promised him 300 talents. The king consented and wrote a letter to Jonathan about all these things. Its contents were as follows: King Demetrius to Jonathan, his brother, and to the nation of the Jews, greeting. This copy of the letter which we wrote concerning you to Lasthins, our king's men, we have written to you also, so that you may know what it says. King Demetrius to Lasthins, his father, greeting. To the nation of the Jews are our friends and fulfill their obligations to us, we have determined to do good because of the good will they show around toward us. We have confirmed as the possession both the territory of Judah and the 3 districts of Ephraim and Lydda and Rathaim. The latter, with all the region bordering them, were added to Judah from Samaria. To all those who offer sacrifice in Jerusalem, we have granted release from the royal taxes which the king formerly received from them each year, from the crops of the land and the fruit of the trees, and the other payments henceforth due to us of the pits and taxes due to us, and the salt pits and the crown taxes due to us. From all these we shall grant them release, and not one of these grants shall be consent from this time forth forever. Now therefore take care to make a copy of this, and let it be given to Jonathan and put up in a spacious place on the holy mountain. The intrigue of Trypho. Now when Demetrius the king saw that the land was quiet before him, and that there was no opposition to him, he dismissed all his troops, each man to his own place, except the foreign troops which he had recruited from their islands of the nations. So all the troops who had served his fathers hated him. Now Trypho had formerly been one of the Alexander's supporters. He saw that all the troops were murmuring against Demetrius. So he went to Malchus the Arab, who was bringing up Antiochus, the young son of Alexander, and insistently urged him to hand Antiochus over to him to become king in place of his father. He also reported to Imalco what Demetrius had done, and told of the hatred which the troops of Demetrius had for him, and he stayed there many days. Now Jonathan sent to Demetrius the king a request that he remove the troops of the citadel from Jerusalem and the troops in the strongholds, for they kept fighting against Israel. And Demetrius sent this message to Jonathan: not only will I do these things for you and your nation, but I confer great honor on you and your nation if I find an opportunity. Now then you will do well to send me men who will help me, for all my troops have revolted. So Jonathan sent 3,000 stalwart men to him at Antioch, and when they came to the king rejoiced at their arrival. Then the men of the city assembled within the city to the number of 120,000, and they wanted to kill the king. But the king fled into the palace. Then the men of the city seized the main streets of the city and began to fight. So the king called the Jews to his aid, and they all rallied about him and then spread out through the city, and they killed on that day as many as 100,000 men. They set fire to the city and seized much spoil on that day, and they saved the king. When the men of the city saw that the Jews had gained control of the city as they pleased, their courage failed, and they cried out to the king this entreaty: grant us peace and make the Jews stop fighting against us and our city. And they threw down their arms and made peace. So the Jews gained glory in the eyes of the king and of all the people of his kingdom, and they returned to Jerusalem with much spoil. So Demetrius the king sat on the throne of his kingdom, and the land was quiet before him. But he broke his word about all that he had promised, and he became estranged from Jonathan, and did not repay the favors which Jonathan had done to him, but oppressed him greatly. Trypho seizes power. After this, Trypho returned, and with him the young boy Antiochus, who began to reign and put on the crown. All the troops that Demetrius had cast off gathered around him, and they fought against Demetrius, and he fled and was routed. And Trypho captured the elephants and gained control of Antioch. Then the young Antiochus wrote to Jonathan, saying, I confirm you in the high priesthood, and set you over the 2 districts, and make you one of the friends of the king. And he sent him gold plate and a table service, and granted him the right to drink gold cups and dress in purple and wear a gold buckle. Simon his brother he made Bangalore from the ladder of time to the borders of Egypt. Campaigns of Jonathan and Simon, verses 60 to 74. Then Jonathan set forth and travelled beyond the river and among the cities, and all the army of Syria gathered to him as allies. When he came to Ascalon, the people of the city met him and paid him honor. From there he departed to Gaza, but the men of Gaza shut him out. So he besieged it and burned its suburbs with fire and plundered them. Then the people of Gaza pleaded with Jonathan, and he made peace with them and took the sons of their rulers as hostages and sent them to Jerusalem. And he passed through the country as far as Damascus. Then Jonathan heard that the officers of Demetrius had come to Kadesh in Galilee with a large army, intending to remove him from office. He went to meet them, but left his brother Simon in the country. Simon encamped before Bethsur and fought against it for many days and hemmed it in. Then they asked him to grant them terms of peace, and he did so. He removed them from there, took possession of the city, and set a garrison over it. Jonathan and his army encamped by the waters of Gennesaret. Early in the morning they marched to the plain of Hazor, and behold, the army of the foreigners met him in the plain. They had set an ambush against him in the mountains, but they themselves met him face to face. Then the men in ambush emerged from their places and joined battle. All the men of Jonathan fled. Not one of them was left, except Mattathias, the son of Absalom, and Judas, the son of Calphi, commanders of the forces of the army. Jonathan rent his garments and put dust on his head and prayed. Then he turned back to the battle against the enemy and routed them, and they fled. When his men who were fleeing saw this, they returned to him and joined him in the pursuit as far as Kadesh to the camp, and there they encamped. As many as 3,000 of the foreigners fell that day, and Jonathan returned to Jerusalem. 1 Maccabees chapter 12. Alliances with Rome and Sparta. Now when Jonathan saw that the time was favorable for him, he chose men and sent them to Rome to confirm and renew the friendship with them. He also sent letters to the same effect to the Spartans and to other places. So they went to Rome and entered this antechamber and said, Jonathan the high priest and the Jewish nation have sent us to renew the former friendship and alliance with them. And the Romans gave them letters to the people in every place, asking them to provide for the envoys safe conduct to the land of Judah. This is a copy of the letter which Jonathan wrote to the Spartans. Jonathan, the high priest, the senate of the nation, the priests, and the rest of the Jewish people to their brethren, the Spartans, greeting. Already in time past, a letter was sent to Onias, the high priest from Aries, who was king among you, stating that you are our brethren. As the appended copy shows, Onias welcomed the envoys with honor and received the letter, which contained a clear declaration of alliance and friendship. Therefore, though we have no need of these things, since we have as encouragement the holy books which are in our hands, we have undertaken to send to renew our brotherhood and friendship with you, so that we may not become estranged from you, for a considerable time has passed since you sent your letter to us. We therefore remember you constantly on every occasion, both in our feasts and on other appropriate days, at the sacrifices which we offer and in our prayers, as it is right and proper to remember brethren. And we rejoice in your glory. But as for ourselves, many afflictions and many wars have encircled us. The kings round about us have waged war against us. We were unwilling to annoy you and our other allies and friends with these wars, for we have the help which comes from the heaven for our aid. And we were delivered from our enemies, and our enemies were humbled. We therefore have chosen Numenius the son of Antiochus and Antipater the son of Jason, and have sent them to Rome to renew our former friendship and alliance with them. We have commanded them to go also to you and greet you and deliver to you this letter from us concerning the renewal of our brotherhood. And now please send us a reply to this. This is a copy of the letter which they sent to Onias. Arius, king of the Spartans, to Onias the king, high priest, greeting. It has been found in writing concerning the Spartans and the Jews that they are brethren and are of the family of Abraham. And now that we have learned this, please write us concerning your welfare. We, on our part, write to you that your cattle and your property belong to us, and ours belong to you. We therefore command that our invoice report you accordingly. Further complaints of Jonathan and Simon. Now Jonathan heard that the commanders of Demetrius had returned with a large force than before to wage war against him. So he marched away from Jerusalem and met them in the region of Hamath, for he gave them no opportunity to invade his own country. He sent spies to their camp, and they returned and reported to him that the enemy were being drawn up in formation to fall upon the Jews by night. So when the sun set, Jonathan commanded his men to be alert and to keep their arms at hand so as to be ready all night for battle, and he stationed outposts around the camp. When the enemy heard that Jonathan and his men were prepared for battle, they were afraid and terrified at heart. So they kindled fires in their camps and withdrew. But Jonathan and his men did not know it until morning, for they saw the fires burning. Then Jonathan pursued them, but he did not overtake them, for they had crossed the Eleutherus river. So Jonathan turned aside against the Arabs who were called Zabideans, and he crushed them and plundered them. Then he broke camp and went to Damascus and marched through all that region. Simon also went forth and marched through the country as far as Ascalon and the neighboring strongholds. He turned aside to Joppa and took it by surprise, for he had heard that they were ready to hand over the stronghold to the men whom Demetrius had sent. And he stationed a garrison there to guard it. When Jonathan returned, he convened the elders of the people and planned with them to build strongholds in Judea, to build the walls of Jerusalem still higher, and to erect a high barrier between the citadel and the city to separate it from the city, in order to isolate it so that its garrison could neither buy nor sell. So they gathered together to build up the city. Part of the wall of the valley to the east had fallen, and he repaired the section called Caphenetha. And Simon built Arida in the Shephelah. He fortified it and installed gates bolts. Trypho captures Jonathan. Then Trypho attempted to become king of Asia and put on the crown, and to raise his hand against Antiochus the king. He feared that Jonathan might not permit him to do so, but might make war on him, so he kept seeking to seize and kill him, and he marched forth and came to Bethshan. Jonathan went out to meet him with 40,000 picked fighting men, and he came to Bethshan. When Trypho saw that he had come with a large army, he was afraid to raise his hand against him. So he received him with honor and commended him to all his friends, and he gave him gifts and commanded his friends and his troops to obey him as they would himself. Then he said to Jonathan, "Why have you buried all these people when we are not at war? Dismiss them now to their homes and choose for yourself a few men to stay with you, and come with me to Ptolemy's. I will hand it over to you as well as the other strongholds and the remaining troops and all the officials, and will turn round and go. For that is why I am here." Jonathan trusted him and did as he said. He sent away the troops, and they returned to the land of Judah. He kept with himself 3,000 men, 2,000 of whom he left in Galilee, while 1,000 accompanied him. But when Jonathan entered Ptolemy, the men of Ptolemy closed the gates and seized him, and all who had entered with him they killed with the sword. Then Trypho sent troops and cavalry into Galilee and the great plain to destroy all Jonathan's soldiers. But they realized that Jonathan had been seized and had perished along with his men, and they encouraged one another and kept marching in close formation, ready for battle. When their pursuers saw that they would fight for their lives, they turned back. So they all reached the land of Judah safely, and they mourned for Jonathan and his companions and were in great fear, and all Israel mourned deeply. And all the nations round about them tried to destroy them, for they said, "They have no leader or helper. Now therefore let us make war on them and blot out the memory of them from among men." 1 Maccabees chapter 13. Simon takes command. Simon heard that Trypho had assembled a large army to invade the land of Judah and destroy it, and he saw that the people were trembling and fearful. So he went up to Jerusalem, and gathering the people together, he encouraged them, saying to them, "You yourselves know what great things I and my brothers and the house of my father have done for the Lord and the sanctuary. You know also the wars and difficulties which we have seen. By reason of this, all my brothers have perished for the sake of Israel, and I alone am left. And now far be it from me to spare my life in any time of distress, for I am not better than my brothers. But I will avenge my nation and the sanctuary, and your wives and children, for all the nations have gathered together out of hatred to destroy us." The spirit of the people was rekindled when they heard these words, and they answered in a loud voice, "You are our leader in place of Judas and Jonathan, your brother. Fight our battles, and all that you say to us we will do." So he assembled all the warriors and hastened to complete the walls of Jerusalem, and he fortified it on every side. He sent Jonathan the son of Absalom to Joppa, and with him a considerable army. He drove out its occupants and remained there. Deceit and treachery of Trypho. Then Trypho departed from Ptolemy with a large army to invade the land of Judah, and Jonathan was with him under guard. And Simon encamped in Adida, facing the plain. Trypho learned that Simon had risen up in place of Jonathan his brother, and that he was about to join battle with him. So he sent envoys to him and said, "It is for the money that Jonathan your brother owed the royal treasury in connection with the offices he held that we are detaining him. Send now 100 talents of silver and 2 of his sons as hostages, so that when released he will not revolt against us, and we will release him." Simon knew that they were speaking deceitfully to him, but he sent to get money and the sons, lest he arose great hostility among the people, who might say, "Because Simon did not send him the money and the sons, he perished." So he sent the sons and the 100 talents, but Trypho broke his word and did not release Jonathan. After this, Trypho came to invade the country and destroy it, and he encircled around by the way to Adora. But Simon and his army kept marching along opposite to every place he went. Now the men in the citadel kept sending envoys to Trypho, urging him to come to them by way of the wilderness and to send them food. So Trypho got all his cavalry ready to go. But that night a very heavy snow fell, and he did not go because of the snow. He marched off and went into the land of Gilead. When he approached Bascama, he killed Jonathan, and he was buried there. Then Trypho turned back and departed to his own land. Jonathan's tomb. And Simon sent and took the bones of Jonathan, his brother, and buried him in Mordain, the city of his fathers. All Israel bewailed him with great lamentation and mourned for him many days. And Simon built a monument over the tomb of his father and his brothers. He made it high that it might be seen, with polished stone at the front and back. He also erected 7 pyramids opposite one another for his father and mother and 4 brothers. And for the pyramids, he devised an elaborate setting, erecting above them great columns, and upon the columns he put suits of armor for a permanent memorial, and beside the suits of armor carved ships, so that they could be seen by all who sailed the sea. This is the tomb which he built in Mortain. It remains to this day. Judah gains independence. Trypho dealt treacherously with the young king Antiochus, killed him and became king in his place, putting on the crown of Asia, and he brought great calamity upon the land. But Simon built up the strongholds of Judah and walled them all round with high towers and great walls and gates and moats, and he stored food in strongholds. Simon also chose men and sent them to Demetrius, king, with the request to grant relief to the country. For all that Trypho did was to plunder. Demetrius the king sent him a favorable reply to this request and wrote him a letter as follows. King Demetrius to Simon, the high priest and friend of kings, and to the elders and the nation of the Jews, greeting. But we have received the gold crown and the palm branch which you sent, and we are ready to make a gentle peace with you and to write to our officials to grant you release from tribute. All the grants that we have made to you remain valid, and let the strongholds that you have built be your possession. We pardon any errors and offenses committed to this day and cancel the crown tax which you owe, and whatever the other taxes we collected in Jerusalem shall be collected no longer. And if any of you are qualified to be enrolled in our bodyguard, let them be enrolled, and let there be peace between us. In the 170th year, the yoke of the Gentiles was removed from Israel, and the people began to write in their documents and contracts. In the first year of Simon the great high priest and commander and leader of the Jews. The capture of Gaza by Simon. In those days Simon camped against Gaza and surrounded it with troops. He made a siege engine, brought it up to the city, and battered and captured one tower. The men in the siege engine leaped out into the city, and a great tumult arose in the city. The men in the city with their wives and children went up on the wall with their clothes rent, and they cried out with a loud voice, asking Simon to make peace with them. They said, do not treat us according to our wicked acts, but according to your mercy. So Simon reached an agreement with them and stopped fighting against them. But he expelled them from the city and cleansed the houses in which the idols were, and then entered it with hymns and prayers. He cast out of it all uncleanness and settled in it men who observed the law. He also strengthened its fortifications and built in it a house for himself. Simon regains the citadel at Jerusalem. The men in the citadel at Jerusalem were prevented from going out to the country and back to buy and sell. So they were very hungry, and many of them perished from the famine. Then they cried out to Simon to make peace with them, and he did so. But he expelled them from there and cleansed the citadel from its pollutions. On the 20th day of the second month, in the 171st year, the Jews entered it with praise and palm branches, and with harps and cymbals and stringed instruments, and with hymns and songs, because a great enemy had been crushed and removed from Israel. And Simon decreed that every year they should celebrate this day with rejoicing. He strengthened the fortifications of the temple hill alongside the citadel, and he and his men dwelt there. And Simon saw that John, his son, had reached manhood, so he made him commander of all the forces, and he dwelt in Gaza.